The crystalline walls of the Veteri flagship's analysis chamber pulsed with soft blue light as senior analyst Mai Chen adjusted her neural interface. Her workstation hummed quietly, processing millions of deep space signals every second. After 5 years of scanning the uncharted sectors, she had grown accustomed to the endless stream of cosmic background radiation and dying star songs. But today was different. The signal caught her attention not because it was loud or particularly complex, but because it was beautifully imperfect. Among the precise mathematical patterns of stellar phenomena, she detected something that could only be described as playful, a melody that danced between electronic beats and organic instruments. Analysis Station 6 reporting anomaly in Sector 793, May announced, her voice steady despite her growing excitement. The other analysts, their crystalline forms gleaming under the ambient light, turned their attention to her station. The chamber's supervisor, a towering crystalline figure, glided across the floor. Specify anomaly parameters, Analyst Chen. May's fingers danced across the holographic interface, isolating the signal. The transmission contains organized sound patterns consistent with deliberate communication. However, the structure defies standard mathematical progression. She paused, searching for the right words. It appears to be music. The supervisor's crystalline form flickered with skepticism. Music is a known phenomenon. 17 species in the database utilize harmonics for communication. This is different, May insisted, her heart racing. Listen. She amplified the signal, and the chamber filled with the sound of a classical orchestra seamlessly blending with electronic synthesizers. The piece told a story of contradiction. Primitive string instruments playing alongside digital harmonies, creating something entirely new. The crystalline beings in the chamber stilled, their forms refracting light in complex patterns as they processed this unusual input. May watched as confusion rippled through their ranks. The Veteri prided themselves on their logical, orderly approach to the universe. This signal challenged everything they understood about technological progression. The source. The supervisor's voice carried a new edge of urgency. May brought up the stellar map, highlighting a spiral galaxy in a previously overlooked sector. Third planet from a yellow star. Preliminary scans indicate a technological civilization. But she double-checked her readings. Their primary space vessels still use chemical propulsion. Impossible, the supervisor declared. The signal's complexity suggests quantum communication capabilities. That's what makes it remarkable, May said, unable to hide her enthusiasm. They're broadcasting this using radio waves, simple, analog radio waves. The chamber erupted in electromagnetic chatter as the analysts processed this information. Radio waves were considered primitive technology, yet these beings had used them to create something that captured the attention of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. May continued her analysis, bringing up more data streams. They're broadcasting other signals too: mathematical sequences, visual entertainment, global communication networks. They call their planet Earth. She paused, studying the cultural information embedded in the transmissions. And they call themselves humans. The supervisor's crystalline form pulsed with deep thought. Prepare a full report for the council. This requires immediate attention. As the other analysts returned to their stations, May remained transfixed by the music. In all her years of studying space phenomena, she had never encountered a species that so casually defied conventional development patterns. These humans had somehow created sophisticated art from primitive tools, found complexity in simplicity. She filed her official report with precise, technical language, but added a personal note at the end. Recommend immediate first contact protocol initiation. This species demonstrates unique potential for innovation through paradox. They appear to possess an attribute our database has no classification for: creativity without constraint. As she submitted the report, May realized that the galaxy was about to change. The humans weren't just another species to add to the database. They were something entirely new, a contradiction that somehow worked. And the Vetari, for all their advanced technology and logical perfection, had no protocol for dealing with beautiful contradictions. Dr. Isabella Santos stood before the mirror in her quarters aboard the Earth diplomatic vessel, adjusting her navy blue uniform. The small container of homemade churros on her desk might have seemed out of place for a first contact specialist, but she had learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful diplomacy happened over shared meals. Dr. Santos, we're approaching the Galactic Hub's main docking ring. Her assistant's voice came through the comm system. The Vetari delegation awaits our arrival. Isabella took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. Years of diplomatic training had prepared her for almost everything, except perhaps the reality of meeting crystalline beings who valued pure logic above all else. But she had a theory. Sometimes the most logical thing was to be completely illogical. The docking procedure was flawless, a symphony of advanced technology that made Earth's best spaceports look like ancient harbors. As the airlock cycled, Isabella clutched her container of churros, earning curious glances from her fellow diplomats. The Vetari receiving chamber was a cathedral of light and geometry. Crystalline beings of various sizes and configurations stood in perfect formations, their bodies refracting the ambient light in complex patterns. At their center stood a tall figure that Isabella recognized as High Coordinator Prevail, the Vetari's chief diplomatic officer. "Welcome to the Galactic Hub, Earth Delegation." Prevail's translated voice resonated through the chamber. "We have prepared a comprehensive orientation on proper diplomatic protocols and—" "Thank you, High Coordinator." Isabella stepped forward, smiling warmly. "Before we begin the formal proceedings, I'd like to share something from my home." She opened the container, releasing the warm aroma of cinnamon and sugar into the sterile chamber. The Vetari's crystalline forms flickered in what she hoped was curiosity rather than offense. "This is not in the standard protocol," Prevail observed. "On Earth, we have a saying," Isabella continued, undaunted. "The fastest way to understand someone is to share food with them. These are churros, a recipe passed down through my family for generations. My grandmother used to say that every churro carries a story." She offered the container first to Prevail, whose crystalline appendage hesitated before carefully lifting one of the golden pastries. The other Vetari watched intently as their leader analyzed this unexpected development. "Our sensors detect a precise combination of carbohydrates, lipids, and sucrose," Prevail announced. "However, there appears to be an additional variable our instruments cannot quantify." Isabella smiled. "That would be love, High Coordinator. It's an essential ingredient in all family recipes." The chamber filled with a harmonic resonance as the Vetari processed this statement. Their strictly logical minds struggled with the concept that an emotional state could be a tangible ingredient. But then something remarkable happened. As Prevail consumed the churro, their crystalline form began to pulse with new patterns, colors shifting in unexpected ways. "Our neural pathways are experiencing increased efficiency," Prevail said, genuine surprise evident in their translated voice. "This is unexpected. The combination of textures and flavors appears to stimulate novel cognitive processes." Isabella nodded, sharing the churros with the other Vetari. "Food has always been more than just fuel for humans. It's how we share culture, build bridges, tell stories. My grandmother taught me that sometimes the most important diplomatic tool is a simple dessert shared with an open heart." As the Vetari experienced their first taste of Earth cuisine, their perfect formations gradually relaxed. The chamber's light shifted from stark white to a warmer hue, and the rigid atmosphere began to soften. "Perhaps," Prevail finally said, reaching for another churro, "we should revise our diplomatic protocols to include this concept of shared sustenance." Isabella watched as the Vetari began to interact more freely, discussing the sensation of eating churros and comparing their neural responses. In their own way, they were experiencing something uniquely human, the joy of sharing food with new friends. "My grandmother would be proud," she whispered to herself. knowing that this small step would lead to greater understanding between their species. Lieutenant Sakura Tanaka adjusted the sleeves of her ceremonial uniform as she observed the grand diplomatic hall of the Galactic Hub. The space was filled with representatives from 27 different species, their forms ranging from crystalline to gaseous to vaguely humanoid. As the Earth delegation's security expert and former zero-gravity dance performer, she noticed details others might miss. The way each species moved, their center of balance, their relationship with space itself. The ceremony marking Earth's first year of contact was proceeding exactly as planned. Perhaps too exactly, Sakura thought, watching the Vateri representatives move in perfect geometric patterns across the hall. That's when she noticed the first subtle vibration through the soles of her magnetic boots. Her hand instinctively moved to her neural communicator. Engineering. Status check on artificial gravity systems. The response came through with a burst of static. Fluctuation in main power grid. Backup systems not responding. Lieutenant. The rest was lost as the gravity disappeared. Panic erupted in the hall. The Methian delegates, gaseous beings contained in high-pressure suits, began spinning uncontrollably. The crystalline Vateri froze in place, their logic circuits overwhelmed by the sudden chaos. Even the experienced spacefaring species showed distress at the unexpected failure. But Sakura smiled. This was her element. Everyone remained calm. Her voice carried across the hall, steady and melodious. She pushed off gently from the floor, her body moving with practiced grace. Watch my movements. Think of this as a dance. Using techniques from her zero-gravity performance days, she glided through the space with deliberate slowness. Her arms moved in patterns inspired by traditional Japanese fan dancing, creating clear visual guides for others to follow. See how I rotate my core, she demonstrated, helping the spinning Methian diplomat stabilize. Imagine you're in water, not space. Every movement should flow like a gentle stream. The Vateri observed with increasing interest as Sakura transformed the crisis into an impromptu masterclass in zero-gravity movement. She drew from her knowledge of Earth's traditional dances, showing how ancient arts could solve modern problems. Your species practices this deliberately. A young Vateri asked as Sakura helped them adjust their crystalline form to the zero-gravity environment. We have many art forms that began as survival skills, she explained, guiding their movements. Dance tells stories, preserves history, and yes, sometimes helps us navigate challenging situations. Across the hall, others began mimicking her techniques. The panic subsided as species began helping each other, turning the crisis into an unexpected cultural exchange. Even the Vateri, usually so rigid in their movements, started experimenting with more fluid motions. Sakura reached the environmental control panel near the hall's ceiling, her movements never losing their grace. As she worked to restore gravity, she continued calling out instructions, now incorporating terms from different species' movement traditions. Think of it like methane gas diffusion, she suggested to one group, or Vateri light refraction patterns to another. By bridging their experiences with human concepts, she created understanding that transcended species barriers. When the gravity finally returned, it came back gradually, thanks to Sakura's careful adjustments. The assembled species descended slowly, many still practicing the movements they had learned. The Vateri High Coordinator approached her afterward, their crystalline form shimmering with new patterns. Lieutenant Tanaka, your response was unexpected. You transformed a system failure into a teaching opportunity. Sakura bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that bridged their cultures. In Japanese culture, we have a concept called ma, the space between moments. Sometimes these unexpected spaces, these pauses in normalcy, are where the most profound connections happen. The High Coordinator was quiet for a moment, processing. Perhaps we should incorporate more of these artistic survival skills into our emergency protocols. As the ceremony resumed, now with a noticeably more relaxed atmosphere, Sakura noticed something had changed. The Vateri no longer moved in perfect geometric patterns. Here and there, a crystalline form would shift with a bit more fluidity, a bit more grace. Sometimes, she realized, the best way to change minds was to teach bodies to dance. Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez wiped grease from her hands as she stood before the Galactic Engineering Council. Her prototype sat on the display pedestal, a curious fusion of gleaming quantum circuits and brass mechanical components that many considered an embarrassment to modern engineering. The Vateri engineer's crystalline forms flickered with what she had learned to recognize as barely concealed skepticism. Esteemed colleagues, Rosa began, her voice carrying the warm confidence of someone who had spent countless nights perfecting her creation. I present the hybrid heart drive, a marriage of quantum mechanics and classic steam engine principles. The chamber's lighting dimmed as holographic diagrams sprang to life around the prototype. The Vateri chief engineer's form pulsed with a deep blue hue, their equivalent of a dismissive frown. Engineer Martinez, quantum drives achieved perfection 3 centuries ago. Your addition of primitive mechanical components serves no logical purpose. Rosa smiled, running her hand along the brass housing of her invention. With respect, perfection isn't always perfect. Sometimes we need imperfection to make things work better. She gestured to the mechanical governor at the core of her design. This was inspired by my great-grandfather's steam engine repair shop in Mexico City. He taught me that every machine has a heart. You just have to learn to hear it beating. The Vateri engineers exchanged electromagnetic pulses of confusion. One stepped forward, their crystal structure refracting light in complex patterns. Machines do not have hearts. This is biological inaccuracy. Perhaps a demonstration, Rosa suggested, activating her prototype. The hybrid heart drive hummed to life, its quantum core pulsing in perfect harmony with the mechanical governor. The brass components moved in a mesmerizing dance, regulating the quantum flow in ways the Vateri's instruments struggle to quantify. The efficiency ratings are, the chief engineer paused, their crystals flickering rapidly, impossible. The mechanical components should create drag on the quantum processes, yet they appear to be enhancing them. Rosa nodded, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. That's because machines, like people, work better when you give them room to breathe. The mechanical governor acts like a heart, pumping quantum energy in a natural rhythm rather than forcing it into rigid patterns. The chamber's atmosphere changed as data streams confirmed her results. But the real validation of her theory came 3 days later, when the distress call reached the Galactic hub. A colony ship had been caught in a quantum storm, its pure quantum drive failing under the spatial distortions. The Vateri rescue vessels, with their perfect drives, couldn't navigate the storm's chaos. Rosa stood on the bridge of her test vessel, the hybrid heart drive pulsing steadily beneath her feet. Request permission to attempt rescue, she transmitted to the hub. After a moment's hesitation, they granted it. As her ship entered the storm, the quantum field sensors went wild. But while other ships' quantum drives failed, her hybrid heart drive adapted. The mechanical components acted as a buffer, their imperfect but reliable nature creating stability in the chaos. She found the colony ship drifting, its systems failing. The passengers watched in awe as her vessel, with its strange brass accessories gleaming through the viewports, anchored alongside them, and established a rescue corridor. Hours later, with the colonists safe and her drive's success undeniable, Rosa received a priority transmission from the Galactic Engineering Council. They had approved immediate production of the hybrid heart drive for all rescue vessels. Your predecessor was wise, the chief engineer admitted during the formal announcement. Sometimes the best solutions do have a heartbeat. Rosa's philosophy spread beyond engineering. Soon, other species began experimenting with hybrid technologies, finding new ways to combine the reliable simplicity of mechanical systems with advanced quantum science. Vateri ships started sporting brass decorations, their crews claiming the sound of mechanical components helped them think better. In her great-grandfather's old workshop, now a museum of engineering innovation, Rosa added a new display, the first hybrid hard drive prototype, still ticking away with its unique rhythm, teaching future generations that the path forward sometimes requires a step back, and the most advanced technology might just need a human heart to make it complete. Dr. Kim Min-ji sat in her laboratory aboard the Galactic hub, surrounded by holographic displays showing cascading failures across the quantum network. Her fingers moved instinctively to the small wooden gaugium on her desk, a family heirloom that helped her think. As she plucked the strings, creating a gentle melody, something in the error patterns caught her attention. "Play that signal again," she instructed her computer, fingers still moving across the traditional Korean instrument. The quantum disruption pattern flowed across her screens, its rhythm eerily familiar. "Computer, overlay the signal pattern with traditional Korean Jangdan rhythms." Her hands trembled slightly as the analysis confirmed her suspicion. The devastating quantum virus wasn't random at all. It was moving in a perfect samaki rhythm, a traditional Korean musical pattern she had learned as a child. "Emergency conference requested," she broadcast to the crisis team. Within moments, her lab filled with holographic representations of the galaxy's top quantum scientists. The Veteri chief science officer's crystalline form dominated the central position. "Dr. Kim, we have no time for musical instruments," they began, noticing her gaugium. "The quantum network collapse has reached critical." "Listen," Min-ji interrupted, something she would never normally do. She played a sequence on her gaugium, then displayed the virus pattern. "The quantum virus isn't fighting the network, it's dancing with it." She quickly explained her discovery, her fingers demonstrating the traditional rhythm. "This is samaki, a rhythm that's been part of Korean music for centuries. Someone has transformed it into a quantum pattern." The chief science officer's form flickered with doubt. "How does this help us?" Min-ji smiled, her hands moving to the mechanical keyboard of an ancient computer she kept as a backup system. "In Korean music, when rhythms meet, they don't fight, they harmonize. We've been trying to stop the virus, but we should be dancing with it instead." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, programming a counter-melody using the mechanical computer's binary patterns. The simple, predictable pulses of the old machine created a foundation that the quantum systems could understand. "Traditional Korean music teaches us that strength comes from flexibility," she explained, integrating her program into a local quantum node. "When the wind blows, the reed that bends survives while the rigid one breaks." The assembled scientists watched as her local node stabilized. The virus's rhythm continued, but now it moved in harmony with her counter-melody rather than destroying the system. "Impossible," the chief science officer whispered, their crystalline structure vibrating with surprise. "You're using primitive binary code to stabilize quantum functions." Min-ji nodded, her hands never stopping their work. "The old and new can work together. Like in traditional music, sometimes you need the steady beat of a drum to guide the complex melodies above it." As her solution spread through the network, she began receiving messages from across the galaxy. Species she had never heard of reported their systems stabilizing. The virus's destructive dance transformed into a harmonious pattern that actually improved data flow. The Veteri, who had long dismissed Earth's binary computers as hopelessly primitive, began integrating similar systems into their quantum networks. They discovered that the simple, reliable patterns of classical computing could provide a stable foundation for the most advanced quantum operations. Hours later, as the crisis subsided, Min-ji sat alone in her lab, playing her gaugium. The holographic displays showed the quantum network operating at 112% efficiency, better than before the virus hit. The chief science officer appeared in her doorway, their crystalline form now producing harmonics that complemented her music. "We owe you an apology, Dr. Kim. We called Earth's technology primitive, but we failed to understand that age does not determine value." Min-ji smiled, her fingers still dancing across the ancient strings. "In Korea, we have a saying. The most beautiful songs are those that remember the old melodies while creating new ones. Perhaps the same is true for technology. Above her desk, the quantum network pulsed in its new rhythm, binary and quantum signals moving together in an eternal dance, proving that sometimes the best way forward is to remember the wisdom of the past. Carmen Ortiz stared at the holographic display of the failing quantum processor, her abuela's voice echoing in her memory. La paciencia es la madre de la ciencia, she would say while teaching Carmen to make tamales. Patience is the mother of science. The same patience needed to layer masa just right might help solve the galaxy's latest technological crisis. The Vateri Research Institute's Quantum Processing Center hummed around her, its crystalline walls reflecting the worried faces of scientists from a dozen worlds. Their most advanced processors were experiencing unprecedented failures, computing speeds dropping to critical levels across the galaxy. The quantum alignment sequences are perfect, a Vateri scientist insisted, their crystalline form pulsing with frustration. We've optimized every variable. Carmen closed her eyes, remembering Sunday mornings in her grandmother's kitchen. Maybe perfect is the problem, she said softly, earning confused looks from her colleagues. Sometimes you need to let things breathe, like masa rising. She pulled up the quantum processor's base code, seeing it with new eyes. The Vateri's optimization algorithms were flawless, precise, relentless, and therein lay the problem. They never paused, never allowed for natural rhythms. Computer, create a new processing sequence, she commanded. Base timing on uploaded pattern sequence tamale recipe prime. The Vateri chief administrator's form flickered with alarm. Systems specialist Ortiz, this is hardly the time for culinary experiments. But Carmen was already working, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. She structured the quantum processing cycles like her grandmother's tamale recipe, periods of intense activity followed by careful rest, like masa needing time to rise. The seasoning of data, like perfectly balanced spices. The layering of processes, like filling wrapped in masa wrapped in husks. In cooking, timing is everything, she explained as she worked. Too fast, and the flavors don't blend. Too slow, and nothing binds together. But find the right rhythm. She activated her sequence on a test processor. The results were immediate. The quantum processor's efficiency jumped by 30%, then 50%, then 80%. The Vateri scientists crowded around her display, their crystalline forms refracting light in patterns of disbelief. Impossible, one whispered. You're using a food preparation schedule to regulate quantum processing. Carmen nodded, expanding the sequence to more processors. My abuela always said cooking is science with soul. Every recipe has a natural rhythm. Why shouldn't quantum processors? As her solution spread through the network, processing speeds stabilized across the galaxy. But something else happened too. The processors began showing signs of self-optimization, finding their own rhythms within the framework of her recipe-inspired timing. Like a well-kneaded masa, she explained to the astounded Vateri scientists, the processors need time to develop their own texture, their own character. The chief administrator approached her station, their crystalline form now humming in harmony with the renewed processors. We don't understand how this works, they admitted. Our instruments can't quantify why allowing these resting periods improves efficiency. Carmen smiled, pulling up an image of her grandmother's handwritten recipe book. Some things can't be measured, only felt. My abuela never used measuring cups. She knew the right amounts by touch, by smell, by generations of passed-down wisdom. The Vateri began implementing her tamal protocol across all their quantum systems. Soon, other species followed suit, discovering that their own cultural cooking rhythms could be adapted to improve technological performance. The galaxy's most advanced computers began running on cycles inspired by everything from Martian soil bread timing to Centaurian crystal fruit fermentation. In her grandmother's kitchen back on Earth, now preserved as a historical site, Carmen added a small quantum processor to the collection of cooking tools. Its operation cycles matched perfectly with the time needed to prepare a batch of tamales. You see, abuela, She whispered to the old recipe book, its pages worn with love and use. You were right. Science is just cooking on a different scale. And sometimes the best technology needs a grandmother's wisdom to make it work just right. Director Lin Wei held up a broken piece of Vateri crystal technology, its fractured surface catching the light in unexpected ways. Where others saw failure, she saw possibility. The conference room of the Galactic Innovation Center fell silent as she placed the broken crystal next to a piece of kintsugi pottery from her family collection. A bowl repaired with gold, its scars transformed into art. For centuries, she began, her voice calm but passionate. The Vateri have pursued perfection. You've created technological marvels, but you've also created a culture afraid to fail. She gestured to the broken crystal. What if that fear is holding us back? The assembled Vatari scientists shifted uncomfortably, their crystalline forms refracting uncertainty. The chief innovation officer spoke up. Director Lin, imperfection is inefficient. It leads to waste, to failure. To penicillin, Lin interrupted gently. To X-rays, to vulcanized rubber. She picked up her grandmother's kintsugi bowl. This bowl is 5 generations old. Each time it broke, my family repaired it with gold, believing that repair makes things more beautiful, more valuable. Each crack tells a story of survival. She activated the holographic display, showing Earth's greatest accidental discoveries. Humanity's greatest innovations often came from mistakes, from unexpected results we were brave enough to explore. The images shifted to show recent galactic innovations: Rose's hybrid hard drive, Minji's musical quantum solution, Carmen's recipe-timed processors. Notice a pattern. Each breakthrough came when we embraced imperfection rather than fighting it. Lin turned to face the Vateri directly. I proposed the Beautiful Mistakes Initiative. Instead of hiding our failures, we showcase them. Instead of demanding perfection, we learn from what goes wrong. She demonstrated by deliberately dropping a crystal component. The Vateri flinched collectively, but Lin smiled as she collected the pieces. Using a technique inspired by kintsugi, she began repairing it with a mixture of gold and quantum-responsive materials. See how the gold traces create new pathways. She pointed to the forming patterns. The quantum field flows differently now, more efficiently, in fact. The imperfection has made it better. Over the next few weeks, Lin's initiative spread through the galactic hub like wildfire. Scientists began sharing their failed experiments, looking for unexpected benefits. Engineers started intentionally introducing controlled imperfections into designs, discovering new properties and possibilities. The Vateri, initially resistant, found themselves transformed by the concept. Their ships began sporting visible repairs made with gold-infused quantum materials, each one telling a story of adaptation and growth. Their crystalline forms developed unique patterns from what they once would have considered flaws. During a crucial presentation to the Galactic Council, Lin stood before representatives of every known species. Behind her, a wall displayed thousands of beautiful mistakes, innovations born from failures, repairs that became improvements. In embracing imperfection, she concluded, we don't just solve problems. We tell stories. Every visible repair on a Vateri ship now carries a lesson. Every adaptation shows how we grew stronger through challenge. We're not just building technology anymore. We're building history. The council chamber erupted in a chorus of agreement from multiple species. Even the Vateri representatives' crystalline forms pulsed with new patterns, patterns that would once have been considered flaws, but were now recognized as signs of growth. Later, in her private office, Lin added a new piece to her family's collection. The first piece of Vateri technology, deliberately repaired with golden quantum circuits. Next to it sat her grandmother's kintsugi bowl, the old and new pieces sharing the same philosophy across space and time. Sometimes, she whispered, touching both pieces gently, the most perfect thing we can do is embrace our imperfections. Across the galaxy, ships now bore proud scars of gold, each repair a testament to survival. The Vatari, once obsessed with flawless perfection, learned to see beauty in the breaks and strength in the mending. They discovered that every flaw could become a feature, every mistake a masterpiece, if only they were brave enough to embrace the art of imperfection. Mei Chen stood at the grand observation deck of the Vatari flagship, watching the swirling colors of a nebula dance across space. 5 years had passed since she first discovered that unusual Earth signal, a blend of classical orchestra and electronic beats that had changed the galaxy forever. Now, as senior protocol director, she was about to present her most ambitious project yet, a complete reimagining of how the galaxy welcomed new civilizations. The council chamber hummed with energy as representatives from hundreds of species gathered. The Vatari High Council's crystalline forms shimmered with anticipation. They had evolved too, their once rigid patterns now flowing with organic grace. Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, Mei began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 5 years ago, I discovered Earth through its music. Today, I propose we transform that discovery into a symphony. She activated the holographic display, showing the traditional first contact protocols floating alongside musical notation. Our current approach is linear, rigid, focused solely on technological advancement. But look what happened when the humans arrived. Images flashed across the chamber. Isabella Santos sharing churros with the Vatari, Sakura Tanaka teaching zero-gravity dance, Rosa Martinez's hybrid heart drive, Minji's musical solution to the quantum crisis, Carmen Ortiz's recipe-timed processors, and Lin Wei's beautiful mistakes initiative. Each of these moments was a note in a greater melody, Mei continued. Together, they created something more beautiful than any single achievement could be. She brought up her new protocol design, a flowing, adaptive system based on Earth's music theory. Instead of judging new species solely by their technology, we evaluate the harmony they could bring to our galactic symphony. The chamber filled with murmurs as she demonstrated. The new protocols adapted like a musical composition, changing key and tempo to match each species' unique characteristics. See how the patterns flow. Mei highlighted the intricate connections. Like a great orchestra, every civilization brings its own instrument, its own voice. Our job isn't to demand they all play the same note. It's to help them find their place in the greater harmony. She played a simulation of her new system encountering a primitive civilization. Instead of dismissing them for their lack of quantum technology, it identified their potential contributions, their art, their philosophy, their unique way of seeing the universe. The humans taught us that innovation doesn't always come from advancement, she said, her voice warm with conviction. Sometimes it comes from remembering old wisdom, from embracing imperfection, from daring to try something that seems illogical. The Vatari High Chancellor rose, their crystalline form refracting light in complex, beautiful patterns that would have been considered chaotic just years ago. But how can we be certain this more flexible approach will work? Mei smiled, bringing up one final display, statistics from the past 5 years. Since embracing human innovations, our collective technological growth has increased by 300%. But more importantly, she highlighted another metric: cultural exchange and species cooperation have increased by 700%. She gestured to the chamber around them, where crystalline Vatari sat comfortably next to gaseous methanes, where organic and synthetic beings shared ideas freely. We've become stronger not because we all became the same, but because we learned to celebrate our differences. The vote was unanimous. As Mei's new protocols were uploaded to the Galactic Network, she received a message from Earth, the original music file she discovered 5 years ago. She played it through the chamber speakers, letting the blend of classical and electronic music fill the space. The Vatari High Chancellor approached her afterward, their form moving in rhythm with the music. When you first discovered that signal, we thought Earth was an underdeveloped world that needed our guidance. We never imagined that we needed each other. Mei finished, watching the nebula's colors dance. The best symphonies are those where every instrument has its moment to shine. Above them, The first ships bearing the new protocols launched into deep space. Their hulls bore an inscription in every gnome language. Welcome to the Symphony of Stars, where every note matters. The galaxy had changed, and it was beautiful.